everybody. Welcome to our latest in the Talking Games series here at Auburn University, here at Pebble Hill. I am Dr. Emily Friedman. I am as of now, my title has changed. I am the Lyles Professor of English at Auburn University. And I am thank you. And I'm so incredibly thrilled to have this entire fall of opportunities to talk about playful media of all kinds and playful thinking with so many people that are dear to me. If you look at the flyer, the little postcard in the back, you'll see we have one more incredibly wonderful speaker coming the week before Thanksgiving. Quinton Smith, also known as Quins, is the founder of Shut Up and Sit Down. He is a game journalist of over 20 years experience, first in video games, then in board games, and now in tabletop role-playing games. He is one of the most dynamic evangelizers for what games can do and be for people all over the world. And I'm so thrilled that he'll be joining us and also running a game here at Pebble Hill that night. So please, if you haven't already RSVP'd for that event, please do. It's going to be a great capper to an amazing semester. All of the people who are here at Pebble Hill and at the Gouge, Matt Mercer, Cameron Kunzelman, Quinton Smith, Jay Dragon, all of these guests have one thing in common, and have in common with me as well. We owe a great debt to Meguey Baker. Meguey is known in tabletop circles as the mother of the apocalypse, as the creator of Apocalypse World, which in the 2010s really transformed the landscape of tabletop role-playing games. One of the things that's important to remember, and Meg would be the first person to tell us this, is that while powered by the apocalypse, the entire rest of the stack of the books on that small table there are part of this new flowering of what we might call story games. It's actually drawing us back to a really old and elemental way that we play together. That this is a really old tradition that goes back to the Brontes, that goes back even further to the ways that we collectively tell stories. This is just the most recent expression of that. So I'm so incredibly thrilled that we're going to get to have a conversation very much in the spirit that we've had other conversations about the communities that have made Meguey's work and the ways in which we are in this extraordinary moment. In the same way that Matthew Mercer was here days before the start of the new campaign of Critical Role, we are days away from the launch of the third edition of Apocalypse World, Burned Over, which indeed is imagining what it means to play in an apocalypse in new ways. And that too is now even more than ever the story of how communities come together. So I have spent all day watching this, basically handing my classrooms over to Meg to watch her be a dynamic conversationalist, and I just shut up and get out of the way after I sing some praises. We are going to leave some time at the end for questions from you, so please be making note of them as we talk. But yes, our whole show from soup to nuts will be about an hour. So thank you for the gift of your time, and let's play. And let's please welcome to Auburn, Meguey Baker. Hello, friend.
Hello, friend.
So we've been starting these kinds of conversations as a kind of origin story of the communities that make you. And you, as my students have said, have a lot of lore and a lot of different communities that have made you. Where do you want to start?
Wow. Okay. I'm just going to roll into it. We'll see where it goes this time.
We're going to play to find out.
Okay. I am a graduate of Hampshire College up in Western Massachusetts, where I studied early American textile history and played a lot of role-playing games and met my husband. He was a year behind me in school. I was a do you have peer advisors here? Like not an RA, but like someone who's just like orienting you to find out like where the laundry is and things like that. Yeah, he was assigned to me and I kept him. He was wicked cute. It's 35 years later and a lot of books later and 3 grown children later. He's still wicked cute. And like that's part of the origin story. But of course, it goes back further than that. I was raised by, my mom was an anthropologist. Like she had trained as an anthropologist, but had 2 little kids. So we didn't pursue that in a way, but it shaped how I experienced the world, right? So when I was a little tiny thing, I was going to every event like this at State University in New York at Oneonta. And so I got a firsthand experience of a lot of the world, like being from the people who were living that experience, right? Going to events put on by the, Asian Students Union or, the African American student group or whatever, all of those things where I was encountering other traditions from the people within those traditions. I also grew up with a lot of storytelling and like storytellers as part of my daily life. My mom went back to college when I was an infant and read aloud to us for 2 hours every night because she was so maxed out as a parent from being a full-time parent, a full-time student, and a full-time worker that was all she had to give us. But it was an incredible gift because I therefore was steeped in all kinds of stories from birth. Like my mom, the year that I was 6, the winter I was 6, she read The Hobbit and the trilogy aloud to us. Holy cow, right? It was wicked cool. Yeah, wicked is a New England thing. It's weird, just roll with it. I also say y'all all the time, which they seem to think is weird up in New England, but I just think it's good. So I don't know if y'all say y'all down here, but I do.
Yeah, y'all.
Awesome. Okay, good. So that's like my origin story, and like there's deep lore we can get into, whatever there, but it's that the power of a story to connect people and the power of a story to be something that transports people out of their everyday experience into something else is something that is like foundational to me. And I know you love this. Like my parents were, I'm putting this in here just for you. My parents were working as staff at a Shakespearean dinner theater where all the staff and crew and actors lived on site. And when I was learning to crawl and learning to talk. So I learned Shakespearean English first. And it kills you. Yeah. So I have a lot of pieces that do come together to make like the origin of who I am and why I am the way I am. I was also diagnosed with ADHD in 1978 when I was a kid, and they recommended that I go on Ritalin, and that time it was untested. And my mom said, let's try everything else. So we did everything else. I'm sure that contributes. So it's weird, right? But like I said to one of your classes today, this isn't unusual. Everybody has this. We all have this. Like everyone sitting in this room, we've already been multiple people. It's just we don't often, we're not often encouraged to think about the multiple people we have been and the lives we've led, and to understand the multitudes we contain in a way that is encouraging us to embrace that. It's like that's something I come to this with is like, oh my God, I'm sitting up here talking, but in ways, as you know, I would way more rather hear you all talk. So I'm looking forward to the second half of this. But that origin story of being really deeply steeped in stories myself, really, enjoying every opportunity I could from an anthropological, yeah, that'll do, background, and like just being encouraged in creativity all the time, to live the world and be like, oh, you came into, oh my God, okay, here's another Meg lore thing, right? All right, so I'm 4 years old and we're living in an apartment and I don't know what's happening, but anyway, there's water like coming down the stairs. And my mom is like, what the heck is this? She goes up, and the sink in the bathroom has been left on and has overflowed and is coming down the stairs. And she's, Meg, why didn't you turn the sink off? And I said, there was a big wolf, Mama, and he wouldn't let me turn the sink off. I don't know. Kids are weird, but like, and she just rolled with it, right? And so that's the sort of energy that I brought. And then I met Vincent when I was 19. He was 18, and he was assigned to me, and I kept him. And he has his own origin story, but also like going into a place where, as being a wildly creative person, and then having the great good fortune to meet someone who was also not only wildly creative, but deeply to his core excited about my own creativity, and vice versa. Like, I'm just lucky. I wish for everyone, I wish y'all, I wish that, So that's kind of my origin story, and we only have an hour, so I'm not going to go into it more.
I want to pull the strand out because I love both you and Vincent so much. And I find it so inspiring that when we think about the origins of the very first edition, this is the second edition of Apocalypse World here on the table in between us. But that you're playing games, you're a role player from the age of 7, and you have a new season of life. You're the parents of young children, and it's in the cradle of that this design experience happens.
I see what you did there.
Well, I'm an English professor. I got to pun a little bit. But so I'm curious, it's not just you and Vincent and your kids. You're surrounded by community of play in that moment. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Absolutely. So we were at Hampshire, and we played a bunch of games there. And then one of the games that we were playing was Ars Magica. And we played in a decade-long game of Ars Magica, just myself and Vincent and Emily Cairboss, who, if you don't know her work, go find it. It's amazing. And then we had kids. When my daughter Meredith was born in 1996, and our son Elliot was born in 2000, and then Toby was born in 2003. 2005. But by 2003, we were already like, how do we manage wanting to keep playing and having young kids and, working? We were both, working. Vincent was working full time. I had been working full time, and blah, 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 maternity leave and things. And in the late 90s, in the 90s and 2000s, having community around to talk about games with was very different than it is now. Very early internet. There was a lot of like bulletin boards, right? And alt.rec role playing, whatever, on and on. All text, fascinating time. And I was running the computer lab, so I would have like 3 computers going at the same time, because we didn't necessarily have tabs that you could have different. Anyway, wild.
Ancient technology, right? Currently on display in the library.
Actually true.
No.
So the community that we had at that time to talk about games and talk about story and like how you shape a narrative was, friends of ours from college, and then folks locally that we'd met after college. And then once the kids came along, it was very much, if we're going to keep doing this thing we love, we have to find a way that it fits between when we can get the baby to go to sleep and before Emily starts falling asleep, because she had a 45-minute drive home. And that's really like where Apocalypse World comes from, is like, I need something that hits now. I need character creation to be fast. I need to get it on the table and I need it to hit hard and fast and fun and out. And I also need it to be very, very forgiving, if somebody can't make it, right? You've got a paper due, you can't make it, you got to work late, your kid's sick, you have car trouble, there's a billion other things, it has to still work, right? when I was in high school, and my goodness, when we were in college, I'm wistful for that. Like, oh, what are we doing this weekend? I don't know. We're playing Ars Magica for days. I don't really need to go to this class. Do you need to go to your class? Nah, it's really nice out. Let's go play Ars Magica in the woods. More times than I did graduate on time. Just would like to say. But did I occasionally skip class to go play in the woods? Yes. So having that experience of that time, right? It's such a gift to be able to I'm just going to spend the next 12 hours making stuff up with my friends. And now I've got this constraint of people are responsible for me keeping them alive. It's a whole different picture. So that's one of the major things of where this came from. And the way that our collaborative process works is one or the other of us will have this is this idea, this is this thing I want to do. And by the time we can work on it ourselves until we can explain it to the other person. And when we explain it to the other person and be like, okay, here's what I'm thinking. And then we're working on it together. So for this book, there was one character that came into Vincent's head and he's like, oh, I think maybe like this. And he came and told me it's the brainer. And then he came and said, what do you think about this? And I said, yes, and we should do this part and this part. And then we were off and running. So that was great. Communities change over time. The needs of people change over time. And over the course of raising our kids and the ways that changes one's relationship to time and attention and ability to focus, that's part of where different games come forward. We did a lot of smaller games between this one and between first edition, which is the second edition, between first edition, second edition, and third edition. We've done other littler games.
Yeah, I always love to read, so forgive me. The back of Apocalypse World, just a little bit. Something is wrong with the world, and I don't know what it is. It used to be better. Of course it did. In the golden age of legend, when there was enough to eat and enough hope, when there was one nation under God and people could lift their eyes and see beyond the horizon, beyond the day. Children were born happy and grew up rich. Now that's not what we've got. Now we've got this. And it describes the different roles you can play, right? Hard holders and focus, and those who are battling against there's not enough and bullets fly and everything breaks. Defenders, searchers, scavengers. And then the question, and you, who are you? This is what we've got. Yes, what are you going to make of it? And I'm curious, I know we've talked about that the framing of this in its original instantiation. This is very Mad Max, right? If you've seen Fury Road, you've seen Apocalypse World's adaptation, right, on screen. And things have changed a little bit in the course of the development of this game across the editions. And so now what I just read on the back is not going to be on the back of Burned Over. So
that is correct, because things do change, right? When we started working on Apocalypse World Burned Over, one of the reasons we were working on that is because our youngest was 12 and their older siblings were playing Apocalypse World and they wanted to too. And we're like, I don't know. There's a lot of swearing in that book. There's, it's a little,
it's for grown-ups.
It's for grown-ups, right? Because we were designing something for our peers at the time, right? When we designed it, we were designing for people in their 20s and 30s. We weren't designing for 12-year-olds. That we did we've done design work for 12-year-olds, but not that one. And so working on Burned Over started as how do we make this something similar that has the same vibrancy and vigor and drive, but is appropriate for 12-year-olds. And it didn't stay that way because our 12-year-old is now 20. And the comment that I've heard about the Burned Over is that it's a kinder but angrier Apocalypse World, because the tag, it's not, there's something wrong in the world. And I don't know what it is. It's there's something wrong in the world and everyone knows what it is. Right? And I'm seeing nodding heads. So we know there's things wrong in the world right now. And it's different in ways that relate to that, because there's no, in the practice of your craft to produce your art, you must be reflecting on your lived experience and what's going on in the real world. Therefore, it would be naive and in ways like inauthentic to try and write this now, because this is 2005 when we were developing this. It was a totally different world. Now we're looking at, what does it mean as a community? How do we get through this? How do we get us through this? Right? It's not quite to the point of Under Hollow Hills, which you have there, which is really about so in Under Hollow Hills you play members of a traveling fairy circus. You're playing in the fairy worlds and in the mortal realm and in all the worlds between. And I love this game very much. It's really about how you play a situation. This is happening. How do you play it? How do you want to play this? What do you want to do here? What's your play? Right? Which is different than the Waves system here of it's more personal. This, you're making a move. That, it's how do you want to play it here? And Apocalypse World Burned Over, we're looking at a lot more stuff that has a lot more community space. It's sort of how the playbooks are laced together a little differently. There's more the sense of space. We already have an ethic through Apocalypse World and through other games, but PBTA that's come down from that of give everyone a name. The NPCs don't just have nameless masses. If they're there, they have a name. They're a person. Right? They might be a threatening person, but give them a name. And with this, we have in Apocalypse World 3, we have more sort of community spaces. What is the marketplace like? What is this different place like? So building out into that a little bit is different, and it reflects changing community that we have, because when we wrote this, it was before the internet. We didn't PDFs didn't exist when we first published. Yeah, right.
Well, it's important to remember that PDFs are a key technology in the history of tabletop role-playing games.
Heck yes,
it changes everything.
Everything. Yeah, PDFs didn't exist. Print on demand didn't exist. And the PayPal didn't exist. All the social media that we know of now didn't exist. So the ways that we were talking to each other and talking about publishing, not just for our game, but broadly in independent role-playing game publishing in the late 90s and in the 2000s, was about how do we do this thing that is impossible, right? How do we break open the world and put something in there that's never been there before when we don't have a model of doing that? Because the only model we had was 8.5 by 11 hardback, glossy, full color, produced by a big company. So many people out there who are I have an idea, I want to do a thing, but there's this incredible barrier called traditional publishing models that we could not get past. So Vincent and I and a whole bunch of our colleagues from the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, were part of really finding new ways to embrace that. So as soon as there were PDFs, we were holy cow, because now I can write a thing and I can send it to you and you can read it. Because before I'd be just us talking about here's what I'm thinking about, but finally being able to have you say, here's what I mean. And I'm oh, I get it, but I don't quite get it. And it became this exchange, this conversation, which is, the basis of community. And now, and I think this is part of why Apocalypse World Burned Over has more community threaded through it. Now we're constantly connected all the time through multiple platforms in multiple ways, and the world is small, right? I remember a moment when I realized how small the world is when I watched somebody having a conversation on, I don't know, G Plus or something. They were having this little conversation that was hard. And someone who was being called out said, well, how do I make it right? What do I do to rectify this? I didn't mean to stumble into this. I didn't mean to be upsetting or offensive or whatever. I forget exactly. Person who should have said, here's how, instead went to Facebook and said, look at this guy being just made fun of him. And he was like, hey, I was sincere. And that was the moment I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Everybody's in all the rooms all the time, right? How many discords are y'all in that overlap, right? You know? So that was a moment for me that I really saw. This was in 2015, probably, being like, look, we are in community with each other constantly. We may not be always taking part in all that community, talking all the time, but we have to show up for ourselves and for each other as though we're part of a broader community than just this room or just this campus or just this state.
Yeah, I love that our conversation is becoming play to find out. So something is emerging, and I'm unprepared for it. We did not script this. It is all improv. We have an arc, and so, but I'm taking us on a side quest because one of the things that I've talked about with a lot of people who are involved in role-playing games and actual play, so folks like Matt Mercer and things like that. Brandon Lee Mulligan has said, who is the Dungeon Master of Dimension 20, a very visible person to a lot of people in the way that micro celebrities are. And he says, if you can throw me away without thinking about it, we are not in community, right? So that's one end, is that like community is the people who you are in these kinds of relationships of mutual reciprocity with. The other version is to say we are all members of the human race. We are all hyper aware of the sum total of humanity because of social media and things like that. And there's answers in between, right? Of like, what is community?
I think there's a big C and little c, right? The big C community is the people who are like, hey, I'm wicked sick and I've got to get this thing done. Can you come over? And they can show up for you, right? That's big C community. People who are like the people you call when you're like, I need a couch moved or whatever. People who will show up for you in an important, factual, actual way. Sometimes they don't have to be in the same physical space. It can be like the folks who, when I went, hey, see, it can like, I went through cancer, and when people around the world were like, hey, we'd rather you not die, and contributed to my meal train, they were showing up for me in an incredibly real way that chokes me up when I think about it too long. And then there's little C community, which is the bigger, like we're all in it. And I'd rather it was that way. I'd rather be in community with y'all than not. It feels more human to me to recognize that piece than not. And I recognize also that, like, even though you are very lovely in saying that this is the first, and may it be, there's also a chance that I might not see you ever again. But that doesn't mean I might not run into you on the internet. That's possible. So I think that gradation is important. I think it's valuable to make the distinction because we still do, as human beings, need people who will be with us through hard times or celebrate with us through elation. We need that. But an awareness of our interconnected web will always help the way we comport ourselves in the world, I think, as more empathetic, more compassionate, more human people.
Yeah, and one of the things that folks talk a lot about in terms of role-playing games like this is like you make this community of the table. It can be virtual, it can be in person. And I think what it might surprise some people in the audience to think about, because they're looking at this. Some of you may be seeing Apocalypse World for the first time. This is a dark and scary. Meguey, this is a scary cover. How is something like this a thing that brings people together and builds community?
Well, the secret is that cover is supposed to be in dialogue with the cover from the first edition.
Oh, yeah?
Okay, so the first edition, we have the second edition of Apocalypse World, which has a person kind of in grimy clothes, basically at the bottom of a well, looking up through a red gas mask, looking upward, right? Okay, this is fine. You have to remember now that my mother read to me the Lord of the Rings trilogy when I was 6. So the version that she had, the covers made a triptych, right? So when we were designing the second edition, we put it next to the first edition, which has a very different image of someone who is very pale and is wearing some sort of low slim black pants, but nothing up top. And they're in semi-profile, so you can't tell, there's no chest illumination, you can't really tell gender. And they're wearing a red gas masks and they're looking down. So when we designed this cover, the two were in dialogue, and it made sense. Because that's not the way it's ever going to be on a table, like for picking up the book. Oops. Anyway, so that's just a hilarious bit of lore.
But also the title, like when I tell my students, we're talking about games that are powered by the apocalypse or Apocalypse World.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Can we ask you a question?
It's an unlikely title for games that we think of as bringing people together in community.
Yeah. Well, so that's where we get the interesting, true, intersecting lines where a lot of my background points me directly to consent and agency and like that respect.
Because you're trained as a sex educator.
I'm a certified sex ed teacher for 7th to 12th grade, and I've done curricula for y'all's age and parents of kids y'all's age and parents of kids who are tiny little ones. Anyway, whatever. So yeah, so bringing that basis of consent and agency into a game where there is violence, where we ask you to think about. We're not asking you to role play about sex or violence, but we are saying, if you're thinking about a character in the world, consider all of them, not just how much of a hot badass they are, but like, how do they relate to the world? How do they engage in relationships that are intimate and important to them? Is that something that's easy for them or difficult for them? And so these questions are ones we wanted to raise with this in the light of consent and agency, because that is part of the underlying pieces of communities, how we are together, right? And what do you make of the world? So the other piece is, I really like disasters. I know way too much about the Donner Party. Y'all, does anybody else have a favorite disaster? Thank you. Yes, thank you. I love that. Right? It's just part of history, right? We get captivated by a theme history, and that is part of what allows us to unlock the rest of history. Is that there's something that is intriguing, something that is so it just lights up our brain. And then we want to know more about it. And then you find out other little details like, oh, now I have to learn this obscure thing. Now I'm learning that obscure thing. That's cool, right? So when we talked about this, we talked about playing with the fabric of reality is the name of this, talking about history, textiles, I think, and worldbuilding.
Because the other part of the toolkit that you're putting into this is you are a museum worker.
Yeah, I'm a museum curator with a focus in textile conservation. Remember that part where I said my mom and my father were working in a Shakespearean dinner theater when I was a little tiny crawly thing? So before that, when my mom was 8.5 months pregnant, she got, this is 1970. So some of you might be old enough to remember what fashions were highly in fashion for a 20-something-year-old woman in 1970. Those skirts were short. She got stuck underneath a big floor loom that she was warping the floor loom. I was really 8.5. I was like, tiny manuscript. The only person working in the room with her was someone who had trouble speaking. The only person that person could find to come and help her get unstuck from the room was the village priest. This is why this is an origin story for me, right? Right? I love the expression on some of y'all's faces right now.
Sorry, that's not in the recording.
It was great.
People are going to be watching this later.
But so like thread is really, I don't know, man. Sometimes in one's life story, there's something, we just talked about history, but there can also be something that you gravitate toward, that just is, you're just drawn to, or you're just good at. And sometimes it's like, I don't know, dinosaurs or working in a library or whatever. But for me, fabric was a thing. The only thing that would wake me up as a baby, I could sleep through anything except the sound of scissors closing. Did you not? Yeah. So thread. So we're going to take this little side detour.
I love
it
side
fits in this because, like, if you're looking at the apocalypse, like looking at it through thread is important. We're all surrounded by fabric right now. We're all appropriately dressed for being in a public event. Thank goodness, I appreciate that. We're also sitting on cloth chairs. There's a cloth tablecloth. There's a rug over there. There's cloth. There's sound absorbing panels around us that have fabric in them. Fabric and textile skills become a screensaver technology. They are so ever present that we forget they exist. And this to me is fascinating, and it's part of where world building delights me. There are other screensaver technologies around them. Often they are other things that we would classify as domestic. A lot of cooking technology is screensaver to this point. Like, yeah, it's, you boil water, you put some vegetables in, then you have soup. But there's like, it's so, stuff we must have. And it's so easily overlooked. What shows up in museums, as we know, is usually, like, the first thing that shows up is warfare, then disasters, then heroic conquests, then the things we stole from people. That's what shows up. It takes a while to get to textiles. It takes a while to get to these things that everybody knows how. And then what happens to us in museums is everybody knew how it worked, so nobody wrote it down, and now nobody knows how it works. It sucks. Because when I have things in my museum, I'm like, nobody knows, right? I literally have some objects that were accessioned into collections. Say, as an item name, what is this? Like, what is this 2018-00- whatever? What?
We think it was a ritual object.
So this is an in-joke, right? Because the number of things archaeologically that wind up identified as a ritual object. Always ask, could it be a toy? Was it a game piece? Was it used in a domestic art, i.e. cooking, cleaning up after cooking, making textiles, caring for other people? Because usually, yes. We are just now, we're sitting here 2025, we're just now at the cusp of that in terms of museum records and archaeology and ethnographic studies that let us enter into that place of saying it could be this. And the level of interdisciplinary work to do that is huge. The amount of things that are misidentified just because the person looking at them didn't know. It happens all the time. We can't help it. We're putting things through the framework we know. And I've had really expert people come in and try to help identify things. And they're like, oh, that's clearly that. I'm like, no, but they're trying. And so that thing of thread and why the apocalypse comes from my bit of background with anthropology from my mom. and my lived experience of going places and doing things and studying. Oh my goodness, I like studying myth cycles will get you a long way. I wasn't allowed to spend unsupervised time with my grandmother till I was 8 and could read for myself and had read a whole bunch of cultural mythologies in different places because that was a problem when I was a kid. She got better. But she had a very, very particular view of how the world was supposed to be. So having a wide understanding of the world and how worlds can structure, and like reading a ton of different creation myths from all over the world feeds in here. Understanding thread as the original technology. The first invention is thread. You cannot make a net. You cannot tie a fur to you. You can't. The first. I mean, I'd start stumbling over my words. The first tool that we made as we came up is thread. So here's the thing. Figure out how you can use what you have in the world to make thread or cordage. Thankfully, now we have YouTube. You can go on YouTube. You can talk and find out. You can find a thing of what that grows around here has fiber that you can make cord from, because that will teach you things about your world right here. And from that, it spreads out, because this is how civilization and community start. And so thinking about an apocalypse that knocks everything out, right, and that knocks it down, it's gone. How do we rebuild? What do we start? How do we pull ourselves up out of that? Also, this happened post Katrina, but not much post Katrina, right? Which I know is a lot closer to y'all than it was to me, but Irene hit right after that and like destroyed some towns just north of me. So we weren't talking about an apocalypse out of nowhere, and we weren't talking about an apocalypse just out of like fiction. Vincent had never watched any of Mad Max when we wrote this. Wow. But we were aware of like the devastation that can happen, and how an apocalypse doesn't have to mean the entire world is gone. It can just mean horrific things happened to your town, your community, this group of people, right? Like if we were like, this is our family group, right? And we all live in the same little town, and that same little town gets hit by a hurricane, that's apocalyptic for us. So it was also looking at not just the apocalypse in the big, but what is it in the small?
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to throw it out to you guys, because we can keep talking, but we also get to do this all the time, and it's unrecorded, which is the cool part. So start thinking about these questions, but I want to distill it back down to, so beyond apocalypse world, which has beget all of these grandchildren, Brindlewood Bay, which in turn has a tradition of carved by Brindlewood, Blades in the Dark, which has Forged in the Dark games, and on and on and on, Belonging Outside Belonging, all these For the Queen, descended from the Queen games. There's this tradition of interconnectedness. But it's not just design work or design thinking. You and Emily Kerboss, for a very long time, were writing about underlying principles, right? And the one that will probably end up on my body in your handwriting, if I say it on a recording, it becomes true.
Made it manifest.
Indeed, is one of the like reflections on play that you could only do after the fact, called "I Will Not Abandon You." And before we kick it out to you guys, I want to hear you fold that last thread of community into the work of your life.
Interesting.
Sorry.
In 5 minutes or less.
We got time.
So the concept of "I will not abandon you" is a way to look back at play that you have done, or meaningful work that you've done with other people, right? It's a way to look and see whether you have continued to show up even though things are hard. Even if like we have a disagreement, did one of us ditch out or did we stick with it and see it through and get to the other side? It's hard work. It doesn't always happen, but it is a concept and framework that I identified years ago, really in work from playing with Emily for so long and Vincent and other people, that there were ways that we could show up for each other at the game table. When we created a world, we agreed to this shared space, we imagining this whole other situation, and then something is going to snag, right? Something is going to not hit right, and we're going to have to work through that, which is the creative process, right? That's just when you have another brain you're bouncing off of. And I Not Abandon You showed up for me in reaction to a couple other things at the time. One of them, which was referred to as "to the pain," which is like, okay, we'll play and we'll push until one of us is like, no, that's like, this is not feeling good. Didn't love that. And then the other one that was showing up at the time was "Nobody Gets Hurt," which felt to me, I mean, it's lovely. And I think there are games out there that work on that. But for me, I needed something different. I needed a way to look at and analyze how we're being in community with other people at a play table or in general. How do I articulate? Here's a place where we ran up against each other's sore spots and accidentally hurt each other and stuck with it.
Because if we love someone, if we care about someone enough to go deep, you will hit something, and you might not mean to. The question is always, what do you do after?
Yeah, it's the question, what do you do after? And that's what this. Thank you. This is a nice little piece, which I didn't think I'd get to talk about communication tools, right? Because there's a whole thing now in gaming that has been for the last 10, 15 years about how do we address this, right? If we're not just playing with the groups, our little group of friends that we play with, we're playing more online, more at communities, more with strangers. How do we support feeling able to have something that's deep and grippy and meaningful and feels fascinating and compelling and like, all those good feelings where you're like, wow, that was really awesome. You feel things and you feel like you did things and it's cool. How do we do that without really hurting each other, right? And there's a lot of different tools that have been built into that, to different games about that. Lines and Veils is one where we sit down at the table and like, okay, I would like to not play tonight anything that involves cancer. Thank you. Cool. Great. And you say, all right, cool, we'll do that. Or whatever. We put other things forward. And there's a lot of other tools that are communication tools. And I'm beginning, thank goodness, to see a shift to recognize that these are communication tools, that there are ways that we can structure the conversation so that we can do the work that we're showing up to do, play the game, make up the stuff, have the fun that we're showing up to do, but still be in communication together. There was a whole epoch, I guess, called the 2000s, maybe up to 2015, that where they were called safety tools, and this is like that. No, they're not going to make you safe. It's a total misnomer, and it's like, oh, we have a safety tool, therefore we're fine. Like, dude, you can put on your safety belt, but you're sitting in your seatbelt. You still have to recognize hazards in the road. You still have to obey traffic lights, things like that. So anyway,
yeah.
So that's where I Will Not Abandon You comes from, is a way to look at how I played and how I want to play and how I want to show up for people. And if there's something that's coming up that is hard, I want to say, okay, we have chosen to sit down together. You have to go real far. You have to go way over there to get a place where I'm going to be like, I'm out. We all have those places, and we should. That's fine. But I recognize that if I've sat down with you to do something together that has any meaning whatsoever, I want to be able to know that we're going to see it through.
Questions from the audience. What's bubbling up? You've been given rich. Yes, sir.
It's more like
I can hear you.
It's more like a game design question.
Yes.
But as far as like familiarity with mechanics, like I grew up playing shooters. Obviously, you see the similarities between them.
Yeah.
And then when just all games, and people in game designers have new mechanics. Sometimes people love them, sometimes people hate them. So how do you like balance like adding, keeping familiarities with other games so it's easy for people to play versus also adding like your own creativeness to the game?
I love that. That's great. Man, I hope you have that written down because I think that's a great multi-part question. So the question being about mechanics and how do we add mechanics without overpowering and like making it all muddy? Does that feel like a fair restating? Okay. So one of the things that Apocalypse World did, are you familiar with Apocalypse World? That's okay. So I say in museum circles that like, if you don't know about my game design, I say it like this. It's like being a really big deal in the world of model trains. If you don't know about me, that's fine. You don't have to, But no offense to model trains. Like my grandfather was huge in his model train club, and I have a lot of respect for model trains. I love trains. Anyway, so
I did a really good time with the details.
I do. So to your question though, designing mechanics for a game, whether it's like a AAA video game or a Uno as a card game or role-playing games, like find a way to balance the mechanics for the thing you're trying to do that's work, right? And if you want, do you want to do that? Are you looking to write a game?
It's like a part of the class, like I'm exploring. Like
okay, so. That's cool. No worries.
Love that for you.
Yeah, no, honesty, showing up, love it. So the piece about game mechanics in a tabletop role-playing game, which is what I'm most familiar with, I would do some board game design to different moving parts, is that you have to make sure that the gears are lining up right, if you know what I mean. Like the mechanics you have to serve the rest of it. And it is very easy to play test your game, which you should do early and often. Like as soon as you have two ideas put together, you should grab a buddy and be like, hey, check this out. Way too many people get way too far down the game design before they show another human being. And so what happens with game mechanics, there's like, I want to do a game about penguins in space, right? Okay, I'm trying to do this penguins in space game. And I need a mechanic for that. I'm more likely to be wrong the first time. But if you haven't had, if you don't trust your process, your creative process, at that point, you're more likely to try to put another mechanic on it to fix it than to strip it back and say, all right, that mechanic's not working. That's okay. And you can see this, the way I think it's easiest to see this is probably in board games that have expansions, right? You have a board game that comes out and it's great. And then there's an expansion for that board game that comes out. And that's all right. You can put it on the first board game and it's a longer game. It's more complex. And then there's another expansion. And if you put that in there too, it's longer and more. And very soon it's like really too unwieldy. And I think that that's a really good lesson for role-playing game design mechanics too. And probably AAA video game design mechanics is like edit, hone it down, make sure it's doing what you want it to do. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Is there more to your question? Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Also, playtesters are really good at identifying friction, but not the source.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I see you here in 1 second. I just want to talk about the playtesting. If a playtester, if you are making anything, if you're making a chili or a role-playing game or a jacket, and someone says, oh, that's, something's terribly wrong with your chili and I know what it is. It needs more whatever. They're wrong. They have their own recipe in their head. That's fine. They can go make their own chili. If they say something is off with this, and I don't know what it is, but something's off, they are really right. And you should go figure out what that is. And that is true for any creative thing, right? Because if you're a painter and you show the sketch for your painting and someone says, oh, you should really put a tree there instead of a mountain. No, they should go paint their own thing. But if they say, something seems weird, something's uncomfortable, check your perspective on that and make sure you're doing it on purpose.
This is more for the professor.
Oh, hey! I didn't know I was being tested today.
No. This is building community through apocalypse. I lived through Katrina, but okay, I'm in the 20% of the city that didn't flood.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I am not as traumatized as other people were. But the people.
But it's still trauma. Just yeah.
But it's less trauma, like not losing your house, losing your relatives, staying in the attic, things like that. No, I didn't do any of that, or overpass. Okay. So people who came back to New Orleans in 2006, I tell people it was the best and worst of times.
Yes.
We had a community because we decided to come back, even though the city smelled because of the refrigerators that had been picked up, and there were gnats going into my nose all the time because of all the pollution and who knows what else. But we all helped each other. If we saw someone like trying to, what do you call it, was freaking out a little bit, we let it pass. Yeah. We try to comfort the person even though we didn't know them, and then say, okay, it's passed, let's go on.
Yep.
Okay. But then sometimes because after a while I moved to other places where they hadn't gone through Katrina, people didn't understand why sometimes I'd zone out or something. And then I talked to a student recently who was a teenager during COVID. I said, your disaster and mine are not the same, but you have the same feeling that it's not normal, like you said.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
There. So that's how you build community, kind of like through the disasters.
Yeah, how do we
do something that it's not normal?
Yeah, it's almost the question of how do we build solidarity without the world coming to an end? So do we have to remake the world in these kinds of ways?
I recommend, there's a book called A Paradise in Hell, which is great. It's about mostly natural disasters and about the communities that form around them. Because this is where I think one of the places we show up for each other as most human, right? When there is disaster, we know how valuable it is to show up for each other, like, period. Like, you can think back through your own lived experience. All it takes is one bad storm or one health crisis, and think about a time you showed up for other people, or people showed up for you. Like, we have that, and I feel like that's one of our most human, best places of us, and it's so common, Yeah, thank you for that.
Yes.
All right, I have a second question.
Yay!
Like when I see like this maybe for major games mainly, like I see them come out in IGN, like the game testers will be like, oh, we love it. And then the community sees it and they're like, oh, we hate it, or vice versa. So a lot of times, like when you're working as a group on a game, you can become like blind to it.
Yes.
But when you have people test your game and it's not up to the community and someone goes, oh, I love this part, and then the next tester comes in and goes, oh, I hate this part. How do you balance that when like deciding what actually put into the game without knowing what people actually want?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of answers to that. Like, one of the things for me in my work is it's my husband and I, and some of the other games right now are working with like our kids. Like, my husband and our youngest are working right now on a game called The Demon Tree, which is like filled with incredible phantasmagoric stuff that I could not do. And Tovi, our young, Tovi's 20. Tovi went through the crisis, like through the apocalypse of it being 8th grade and then having the pandemic hit. I couldn't write what they're writing. It's unreal to me. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. So part of it is thinking about your working group. Right? If you're like looking at a big AAA game, has a lot of different moving parts. It's much bigger than doing the sort of work I do, which is just like me and Vincent and sometimes our kids. but there is a piece there with like different, I wouldn't necessarily call them focus groups, but I would call like different groups of playtesters, and like figuring out like what they had going on, what made it work really well, what made it work not so well. Like all of that is useful feedback. And then confidence is the people who are like holding that game to go forward with your vision. Because not everybody's going to love your stuff. And like we said for years that you need an audience of 3 types of people. You need people who love your stuff so much they won't shut up about it. And you need people who are like, hey, I've heard of it, convince me. And you need that little bit who just hate your stuff so much they won't shut up about it. And that's all good. The piece though there is to have the confidence, and also to like go with what your vision is. And also I think it's really important, I think this is also where some of the bigger games fall down in that, is they lose track of who's holding that vision. And it's much easier to have like 1 or 2 or 3 people hold the vision, like this is what Borderlands 3 is going to be. It's a lot harder. Love to Borderlands. It's seriously, I love Borderlands. It's a lot harder to have this group be like, we're the ones, you know what I mean? It's just, you need a captain on the team. And I think that they run into a different thing that you identified in your question of the sort of insular nature of like, if we're all working on it and we think it's awesome, but we haven't like let that out to breathe, we just maybe just missing a whole big chunk that we just didn't get. And that happens all the time. Like games come out that are like critically acclaimed and then they're like, nah, you know? Then there's games that are like, this is really good, y'all, but it just, I don't know, No Man's Sky had so much hype, right? So much hype out of a weird angle, right? And I love that game. And it's like quietly getting better and better and better and better, but everybody's like over it, you know, because of the way the hype train worked. So I think that that's like one of the big things with trying to keep the clarity of who is actually holding the vision. And when that happens, I feel like you can tell, right? You know, if there's big games that come out and they match up, and then the people who are doing the early reviewing, like, oh, this is awesome. They're not out of step with the actual experience of players. You know, that's my thought. Like when that happens, that disconnect, that's what always goes in my mind is like, oh, they lost track of who's in control, like, or like who's carrying the vision. It's great to have like, you know, if it's you and you and you and you're the ones who like come to the group and we're like, hey, we've got this idea for this game and this is what we want to do with it. And we're all working on it. That's great. As long as we know the 3 of you are the ones who have that. And like there's some place like in Demon Tree, Toby is the one who's like, nah, not like that. Vincent's the one saying, what do you think about this? How about like this? And Toby's like, yeah, that's close. But can you retool this bit? Because that's not quite right. Because we know who's in charge there. And in that particular game, it's Toby. So you gotta have a captain on the team. Yeah. Other questions?
Yeah.
In your game, do you have a scenario where someone takes something apart like a quilt?
Yes. So in my games, I tend to more write, like the games that I write generally are more about the ways that I'm not so much writing a scenario as putting together groups of different types of people and then see what they do next, you know. But the idea of things getting taken apart, like in this, the closest would probably be either the Skinner who does that, who like hold in this, the Skinner is the playbook in Apocalypse World, not in Apocalypse World 3rd edition. That's the Luminous. It's different. The Skinner is the person in Apocalypse World who holds art. You know, who and like there's I'm not even gonna read it. We're on a family show. But there's like the description of like the Skinner is the one who has the capacity for food that's not just getting you through, you know, has the capacity for art or music that's not noise. They have that capacity for art. So it could be in there. It could also be in the Savvy Head. The Savvy Head's all about taking things apart. The Angel's about taking bodies apart and putting bodies back together. Savvy Head's about taking things apart. Like they have a move. It's like things break. That's the true thing. They have Apocalypse. The Savvy Head has a move about oftener right, where you just show up with the right thing in hand, because it was going to be a problem, so you put a socket wrench in your pocket, and now you showed up in the right place at the right time. It's delightful. I love it.
Other questions?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what is kind of like when you release a new book or a new game, what is kind of like the promotional process for you? Like, how do you find like kind of your core audience? Like, where do you go to kind of do that?
God, I wish I knew. Okay, so we're launching our 11th Kickstarter on Monday, right?
They have backed 384.
Yep. And this is the first one where we've ever had a pre-launch page like you had. The thing is that what we say to actually answer that question is you need, for your game, for your creative work, for what you're practicing your craft to produce your art, you need 3 people who are also enthusiastic about it. You don't start with a giant audience. You start with your 2 best friends, and that one other guy, Mitch. We call him Mitch. We've called him Mitch for years. He doesn't exist, but he's the guy we talk about. Anyway, you need 3 other people, and here's why. Because if it's just me, it's just in my head. If it's just the 2 of us, it's just the 2 of us, and that's the conversation. If it's the 2 of us and you, then it's like a stable, like a 3-legged stool. It's stable, right? If it's the 2 of us and the 2 of you, then suddenly we have all kinds of possibilities, right? So if I'm the designer and I'm showing my new baby game to you and the 2 of you, we're going to have all these different interactions of different possible combinations. And also, well, you and I are hanging out and talking deep about this, you're going to be talking to other people. So that's why 3 people. You need 3 people. And you just need to be relentlessly enthusiastic about your game. Do not shut up about it. Right? You can get to the point where you're annoyed to be with 3 friends and be like, okay, but tonight we're just going to watch the game, or whatever. And then the marketing from there, really sincerely, is you show up, you be a good person, you do work, play other people's games, invite people to play your games, work your connections, and not in a networking weird way, but you're like, oh, hey, there's a convention somewhere. I could go there. There's a great playtesting convention in New Jersey called Metatopia. It happens in the early part of November. If you are ever doing role-playing game design or board game design, it is a great convention to go to because it is specifically about playtesting and getting feedback on your work in process. And the work can be anywhere from, I have this idea about penguins in space. Is that anything? I don't know if that's anything. Can we sit down and talk for an hour about whether that's anything? To something that's really, really far along and you are really ready to figure out okay, what am I going to do about the graphic design of this? How am I going to put this, what I'm struggling with should I self-publish or should I shop it around and see if a publisher? So developing an audience is about just love your work. Don't shut up about it. Talk to people about it. They want it. I want it. I want to see what you're doing. I'm really sincere about that. All y'all who are here, I would love to see. I'm excited to see what games you might make because it's a richer world if your games are in it. For real.